Hi there, it's Louise here of Timeless Craft Mama, and today I'm sharing a scrapbook layout process video with you inspired by case file number 192 at Colour, Stories and Inspiration. The challenge is set for you to choose from the mood board that they give you. You have to use the 5 colours, you have to pick 3 evidence clues and 1 testimony clue. So I've gathered a few supplies from my stash ready to produce this layout, and as I go through this process video with you, I'm going to talk you through some of the elements. So the first evidence that I've taken is the text print, and I've used this a couple of different times. So I've torn some pages out of an old book, and I've also used a paper that has some text print on it. What I'm doing here is I'm just taking my photo and I'm going to start to build some of the layers around it. So I've started with a backing sheet, and then looking at the colours of this mood board, I'm starting to incorporate like some browns and some more of those greys and off-whites just to kind of build this page. So as I start to work through, these are all just papers that have come out of my stash, and you'll see that I'm pretty much just using a 6x6 paper pad and just a couple of different elements to try and put this together. So I'm just going to trim back my second part of the evidence, which is to use a solid grey background paper. The third part is to use a technique of tearing. I'm actually going to go ahead and tear some of those old book pages and then stick them onto that solid grey backing paper, just using some matte gel. So I'm just painting that on and attaching it and making sure that it's ready for me to start building some layers over the top. So for me personally, I don't do a lot of mixed media layouts, but every now and again, and just recently, I have started to want to get my hands a little bit dirty, play with some paint and some texture and some paste and lots of fun stuff to build a page. So I thought I'd do a process video for this one just so that you can see what my particular process is for mixed media. Now once I've gone ahead and stuck all these papers down, I actually let my matte gel sit overnight. So again, I like to let my elements dry naturally. So this particular layout was created over a number of evenings and just letting those different elements dry as we progress. Moving on now to some colour, and the colour that was in the mood board was like a really dark maroon red, and I had nothing like that in my stash, so I went ahead and made my own. I just took some red acrylic paint and popped some black in with it until I got the desired colour. Now I'm just using a palette knife to spread that colour around, and at this point I'm sort of thinking to myself, wow, it looks like I've killed somebody on the page. It was really sort of blood red, but I knew that I was going to cover that up with lots of other different elements. So I went ahead and left it and did some splatters as well, just to start to build the background of this page. So while I'm working with the splatters and going ahead and building this, the acrylic paint tends to dry quite quickly, so I did go through with my heat gun in this case. I didn't leave it to dry overnight because I wanted to continue along with this particular layout. So I'm going to give it a quick going over with the heat gun. I didn't film all of that for you because really nobody's interested in watching that before I move on to the next element of this particular page. So I'm taking one of the new Craft stencils, which is the Crackle, and again just with acrylic paint and a sponge, I'm just dabbing some of that through that stencil to give that nice crackle effect on the page. And I'm doing it in a couple of different places just to try and break it up a little bit and really go through that red colour, because I didn't want too much of that red colour to be showing by the end of this layout. So I've done a little cleanup. I've got rid of some of that red, and I'm looking back at the color palette and I'm thinking, okay, there was some more grey and there's some whites and some creams in there. So I'm going to do some splatters with some different colors as well. And for this case, I just busted out some grey acrylic paint, and I'm going to just pop some splatters and some of that acrylic paint around this page. So because I'd also had a little bit of that acrylic grey left and the red was still standing out just a little too bright for me, I then used my palette knife again just to spread some more of that grey paint around, just to break things up a little bit. Nice and rough and messy, just to keep that mixed media feel going. So I've stuck a couple of stickers down and I'm just building some background here using some modelling paste through as stencil. And I'm actually going to leave this white because I really like how the white sort of breaks up that background and helps to sort of stand out with this particular stencil. The mood board did have white in it as well, so I wanted that to shine through and to really distinguish that cream old paper background. A few little more messy touches just with the palette knife, spreading some of that texture paste around and letting that dry overnight. When we come back again, we are moving on to another element to provide texture, and this time it's lace ribbon. So I'm just going to glue down some lace ribbon and start to work on building the cluster in the middle of the page. I've got plenty of colour in the background. I'm happy with the way it's looking, so I'm prepared to now move on and just start to build this page a little more. Now normally when I'm putting together a layout, I actually find that the cluster is the easiest part to put together, but I did actually struggle with this one a little bit. I couldn't really come up with something that I wanted, and I think part of the reason as I watched the video back is just because I wasn't settled on the papers and the colours that I'd chosen. So I'm happy with the final result of how this particular cluster came together, but it wasn't an easy task like what the building of a cluster normally is for me. And you can kind of see that by the way I'm moving around and fiddling with a few things here and there. Now I started off with the page, the solid grey, and I was going to mount that on a black background, but I didn't really like the black. There was no black in the mood palette, so I went with a lighter grey because there were a couple of shades of grey in this particular mood board. So I did change my mind in that aspect, and I think I quite like it more on the lighter shade of grey, despite the fact that none of my papers were straight. I'm just going to give those a little bit of a trim and work with a nice square surface. So this is one of my other evidence clues that I've added here, and that was the addition of leather. So the twine that I've got there that I'm going to put behind that photo is sort of a leather twine. So I suppose you can't really call it twine, but you get the idea. It's got that sort of leather feel to it, which I felt really worked with this page and was one of the evidence clues to use as well. Now, because of the way the twine actually sits, what I've done is I've just spread some matte gel, knowing that it will dry clear and it's not going to affect the background. So I'm just sticking that down in a couple of places with the matte gel, and unfortunately that is the type of thing where you have to leave it overnight to dry. That's what I've done, and while I was letting it dry, I went ahead and typed up my journaling, which was my testimony clue to have a list of 7 things. So I went ahead and I listed 7 of the fun things we did on our family holiday, which is where we took this photo that I'm scrapping. So I then decided, how am I going to get this list of 7 things onto the page? I'd already built my background. I hadn't put any journaling already in. I was going to write it around the outside, and then I was going to cut the strips up and just pop them around the page. But eventually I decided that I was going to make this a little bit interactive. So I actually popped it on its own piece of cardstock, and I'm going to pop that underneath the photo that you can actually lift up and read what that journaling is. So I'm just trimming that page again purely because with it the size that it was, I'd covered up most of the twine, and it really was pointless having it there if you couldn't see the twine. So I've just trimmed that back a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and mount the little flap to hide that journaling behind. Now, I don't know if I'm really happy with the inside flap of the hidden element. So when you open it up, you'll see I'm going to pop a little piece of paper that matches the outside onto the inside. I'm not quite happy with that little element, but for the amount of time that this particular layout is going to be open, it was really pointless spending too much time actually doing anything really on the inside of that journaling. So I purely just covered up some of that paper, and later on I'm going to pop a few little elements into that just to blend it in with the actual page itself. Now, these collectibles are from a Craft collection called Antique Bazaar. And what I'm doing now is I'm just taking some elements from my stash, some of these clock faces and some little sayings and some words and some extra elements to add a little bit of texture to this page. I really wanted to incorporate that chain wire, but it wasn't fitting with the page and it just wasn't working the way I wanted it to, so it ends up not on the final layout. And there's a couple of other things too, like that really pretty grey butterfly, but again, just moving things around the page, I couldn't quite get them to work the way I wanted them to, and unfortunately they just had to be left off. So I'm just going to pop some of these flowers around and some of these elements from that collection and start to play with a few little extras on this layout. The final evidence clue that I've used is leaves. So you had to incorporate 3, and I've incorporated 5 or 6, but I sort of took a lot of inspiration from that mood board, which allowed me to play around with some really fun elements and come up with this really great mixed media layout that I'm really, really happy with. And because I pulled quite a few of these items from my stash, I did actually want to incorporate them on this layout. Some of them weren't working, and some of them were sort of okay on the page, but if I've left anything off, it's purely just because I didn't feel like it fit with the page, or it was going to be too much on the page. I already had a pretty busy background going on, so I didn't need a lot of extra elements. I just needed a couple of little touches to help finalize this layout. Now, if you see me also lifting that hidden journaling up all the time, it's because when I'm mounting the flowers, I want to make sure that I'm not going to trap that journaling underneath. So I'm constantly just moving things around on the page, making sure that they are actually going to work long term down the track when somebody tries to actually open that up and read the journaling that's underneath. So starting to glue a couple of these little elements down now, going through my stash, picking out things. I really wanted that grey butterfly to work, but I just couldn't get it anywhere on the page that I was happy with. So it did get left off as well. So now that I'm happy with most of the elements on the layout, I'm going to go ahead and title this, and I'm going to use a chipboard from Scrapbook and just cover it with silver Versacolor ink and then some crystal embossing powder and heat set that just to give it that really nice silver that's going to fit quite well with the grey of this particular layout. So then same with this heart from Case Craft, again with just the silver Versacolor, and I don't know why I heat set it because I knew it wasn't going to dry, but for whatever reason I heat set it. You didn't need to do that if you're following along. So placing these elements on the page, the heart was actually also one of the evidence clues, so I've just snuck another one of those in there as well. and I'm just positioning that on the layout, making sure that I'm happy with how everything's looking and ready to pop on the final touches. So we're coming to the end of this layout now. Everything's glued down, everything's dry. The layout has again been left overnight. The final thing I want to do is just take a little bit of gesso and spread it around on those flowers just to make them not so stark. I want them to sort of blend in with the mixed media feel of this page. So I'm also taking some Kindy Glitz in antique silver and just spreading that around with my fingers on those flowers. And then I'm also adding some liquid pearls in silver pearl, and that's again just to bring back that grey element of this particular layout. So I felt like for me grey was quite a dominant colour with the background paper, and while I wanted the red to be in there, I didn't want it to be too dominant as far as the red was concerned. So I am now finished once I've popped some of that silver liquid pearls around the page. I'm going to go ahead and show you some close-ups of the elements on this particular layer. I really hope you enjoyed this mixed media page from me for something different. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe or check out my blog for future videos from me. Thanks so much.